The rain had been falling all evening, thick and steady, turning the streets into shallow rivers. It was one of those nights when most people just wanted to get home as fast as they could. The wind was cold, the sky was dark, and the sound of thunder echoed through the distance. Inside his old car, a man named Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to see through the blurry windshield. He had worked a long shift and was tired, hungry, and ready to crawl into bed. But fate had a different plan for him that night. As he drove along the lonely road, his headlights caught something ahead, a car parked awkwardly on the side, its hazard lights flashing in the heavy rain. At first, Daniel thought about driving past it. It was late, the rain was getting worse, and he didn't know who might be inside. But as he got closer, he saw the shape of an elderly woman standing outside her car, struggling with an umbrella that kept flipping inside out. His heart sank a little. She looked scared, cold, and completely helpless. He slowed down, pulled over, and rolled down his window just enough to speak through the rain. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he called out. The woman turned toward him, her hair wet and face pale. "My tire, it burst," she said with a shaky voice. "I tried calling for help, but no one's come." Daniel nodded, opened his door, and stepped into the downpour. The cold hit him instantly, soaking his jacket in seconds. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'll change it for you." She tried to protest, saying she didn't want to trouble him, but he smiled and shook his head. "It's no trouble," he replied. He opened her trunk and found the spare tire. The ground was muddy, and every time he knelt, the water soaked through his jeans. The tools were slippery, his hands freezing, but he kept working without complaint. The woman stood nearby, trying to hold the umbrella over him, though it barely made a difference. Between flashes of lightning and gusts of wind, Daniel finally managed to get the new tire in place. He stood up, wiping his face with his sleeve, breathing hard but smiling faintly. "All done," he said. "You're good to go." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You must have somewhere to be." Daniel shrugged. "Just heading home," he said. Anyone would have done the same. She reached into her purse and tried to hand him some money, but he raised his hand. "No, please," he said kindly. "You don't have to. Just help someone else when you get the chance. That'll be enough for me." For a moment she just looked at him, almost speechless. Then she smiled through her tears and said, "I will. I promise." He gave a small wave, climbed back into his car, and drove off into the rain. As Daniel drove, the heater blowing warm air against his wet clothes, he couldn't stop thinking about the look on the woman's face. He didn't feel like a hero. In truth, he'd almost kept driving just like everyone else. But something deep inside him, something small and quiet, had told him to stop. And now, even though he was drenched and tired, he felt lighter somehow, like maybe the world wasn't such a bad place after all. When he got home, the lights in the small apartment were dim. His wife, Lena, was asleep on the couch, a blanket half covering her. She had been working long hours at the diner, and exhaustion had become part of her life. Daniel looked at her for a moment before hanging his wet jacket by the door. He didn't wake her. Instead, he made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and listened to the rain. He thought about the woman again. She must have been someone's grandmother, maybe on her way home from visiting family. What if no one had stopped for her? He pictured her standing there scared while car after car passed by. The thought made his chest tighten. Doing the right thing, he whispered to himself, shouldn't depend on convenience. He smiled faintly and took a sip of his tea. The warmth felt good. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness would start a chain of events that would come back to him in a way he could never have imagined. Meanwhile, miles away, the elderly woman sat in her now running car, the heater blowing warm air on her frozen hands. She replayed what had just happened in her mind. She had been waiting for nearly an hour before Daniel stopped. Many drivers had seen her, but none had slowed down. She had started to think maybe people just didn't care anymore. Then, out of nowhere, this soaked, tired man had come along and changed everything. Her eyes welled up again as she whispered, "Thank you." Not just to him, but to the world for reminding her that kindness still existed. She started the car and pulled back onto the road, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: faith in humanity. By the time Daniel finally crawled into bed, it was past midnight. He was still damp, his muscles sore, but his heart was calm. He lay beside his wife, careful not to wake her, and listened to her slow breathing. The world outside was still noisy with rain, but inside it felt peaceful. He didn't tell her about the woman right away. It didn't feel like something he needed to brag about. It was just one of those quiet moments you keep to yourself, the kind that reminds you who you are. Days passed. Work was the same as always, long, tiring, but necessary. Bills kept coming, and Daniel and Lena kept doing their best to stay afloat. Yet every now and then, when Daniel felt worn out or frustrated, he would think back to that rainy night and the look of gratitude on the woman's face. It made him believe that even the smallest good deed mattered more than most people realized. And somewhere deep in his heart, he hoped that woman had truly kept her promise to help someone else when she could. Because maybe, just maybe, that was how the world healed itself. Not through grand gestures or loud speeches, but through quiet moments of compassion shared between strangers. As the rain continued to fall that week, washing away the dust of the streets, Daniel went on with his routine. But something inside him had shifted. He began noticing more. The tired cashier at the store, the neighbor struggling with groceries, the kid shivering at the bus stop. Little things. He found himself offering a hand more often, smiling more easily, being patient where he might not have been before. It wasn't that his life suddenly became easier. It was just that he had started seeing how much difference one small choice could make. That rainy night had reminded him that goodness didn't need an audience. It just needed courage, the courage to care when no one else does. And while Daniel didn't know it yet, that courage had already started a quiet miracle, one that was making its way back toward him even as he went about his ordinary days, unaware that kindness always finds its way home. The rain had stopped by the time the old woman reached the small roadside diner. It was late, almost closing time, and the air smelled of wet earth and coffee. She parked her car carefully, still shaken from the flat tire incident, and stepped inside. The warm light and the gentle hum of a radio felt like a relief after that long, cold hour in the rain. The diner was quiet, with only one waitress working behind the counter. She looked to be in her late 20s, wearing a faded uniform and a tired but kind smile. The woman could tell from her face that she had had a long day. Still, the young waitress greeted her warmly. "Good evening, ma'am. What can I get you?" The woman smiled weakly and said, "Just some coffee and maybe a slice of pie, dear. It's been a long night." The waitress nodded and brought the order quickly, setting the warm cup of coffee in front of her. "Rough day?" she asked gently. The woman sighed, holding the cup in both hands. "You could say that. I got stuck out there in the rain with a flat tire. Thought I'd never get home." The waitress's eyes widened. "That sounds awful. Did someone stop to help?" The woman nodded, her face softening into a smile. "Yes, a kind man did. Didn't even tell me his name. He changed the tire all by himself, got soaked to the bone. Wouldn't take a penny from me. Just told me to help someone else when I get the chance." She looked out the window as if still seeing that rainy road in her mind. "It's rare these days, isn't it? People stopping to help." The waitress smiled a little sadly.
"It is. Most people just rush past. They didn't talk much after that."
The woman could see that the waitress was tired, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Yet she kept moving with quiet grace, refilling the coffee, wiping down tables, and humming softly to herself. The old woman noticed the small details, the way her shoes were worn out, the faint redness around her eyes, and the way she sighed quietly every time she thought no one was watching. Something about her reminded the woman of herself many years ago, when she was young, struggling, and trying to make ends meet. She finished her pie slowly, thinking about what Daniel had said. Just help someone else when you can. When the check came, it wasn't much. The diner was cheap and the woman could easily afford it. But she knew this moment was about more than paying for food. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope she'd kept for emergencies. Inside was some cash, money she had set aside for groceries and gas. She hesitated for a second, then took out a few bills and placed them under the coffee cup along with a small handwritten note on a napkin. Before leaving, she glanced back at the waitress who was wiping down the counter and didn't notice her slip out the door. The woman smiled softly, whispered a quiet prayer, and stepped into the cool night air, feeling lighter than she had in days. Inside, the waitress returned to the table a few minutes later. She was cleaning up when she noticed the folded napkin under the empty cup. Thinking it was just trash, she picked it up and froze when she felt the money underneath. She unfolded it carefully and saw 5 $100 bills neatly tucked inside. Her hands trembled as she opened the napkin fully and read the short note. "You don't owe me anything. I've been where you are. If you ever feel hopeless, remember that good people still exist. For a long moment she couldn't move. Her throat tightened and tears filled her eyes. She looked around the diner, hoping to catch the woman before she left, but the parking lot was empty. The lights outside glowed softly in the mist, and all she could do was stand there, holding the napkin close to her chest. She sat down at the booth, her heart pounding. $500. It was more than she made in a week. She thought of the unpaid bills at home, the groceries she couldn't afford, and how she'd been stretching leftovers to make them last. For weeks she had been telling herself that things would get better, but deep down she had started losing hope. And now, out of nowhere, this stranger had done something so kind, so unexpected, that it felt almost like a dream. She wiped her eyes quickly when her manager came out from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly, hiding the money in her apron. "Yes, sir, just tired." He nodded and went back inside, leaving her alone again. She sat there for a while, staring out the window, thinking about what the note said. Good people still exist. The words echoed in her mind like a whisper of comfort she hadn't realized she needed so badly. When her shift ended, she locked up the diner and stepped outside into the damp air. The streets were quiet, the rain now just a faint drizzle. She got into her old car and sat there for a while before driving home. The dashboard light flickered, the engine coughed, but the car started. As she drove, she thought about the woman, her kind eyes, her gentle smile. She wondered what had made her leave that much money behind. Maybe she had been helped by someone once too. Maybe this was her way of passing it forward. By the time she reached her apartment, the city lights were fading behind her. The building she lived in was small and a little run down, but it was home. Inside, her husband was asleep on the couch, his work boots still on. A stack of unopened bills sat on the table. She put her bag down quietly, walked over to him and brushed his hair back gently. He stirred slightly and mumbled her name before falling back asleep. She stood there for a moment, her eyes glistening, then walked to the kitchen. She pulled the napkin and money from her apron and laid them on the table. She read the note again and again, tracing the handwriting with her finger. A smile slowly appeared on her face, tired but full of warmth. The next morning she woke up early. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, and for the first time in weeks she didn't feel that heavy weight pressing on her chest. She made coffee, cooked breakfast, and waited for her husband to wake. When he did, she handed him the note and the money. At first, he didn't understand. "Where did this come from?" he asked, frowning slightly. She told him everything: the old woman, the rain, the tip, the message. When she finished, he just sat there quietly for a moment, then looked up at her with wide eyes. "An old woman on the roadside?" he said softly. "I helped one last night," her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He told her about how he'd seen the woman stranded in the rain, how he'd changed her tire, and how she'd wanted to pay him, but he refused. "I told her to just help someone else when she could," he said. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, both realizing the miracle that had unfolded between them. A single act of kindness had come full circle in less than a day. He had helped her, and she had helped them, without either of them knowing who the other was. The waitress laughed softly through her tears. "She really did keep her promise," she said. Daniel smiled, shaking his head. "Guess good things do come back around." They sat together, holding hands across the table, both quiet, both grateful. The world outside went on as usual, but for them, something had changed. It wasn't just about the money. It was the feeling that life, even in its hardest moments, still had room for miracles. That night, as they sat together watching the rain return, Lena whispered, "When good people do good things, it really does come back, doesn't it?" Daniel nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe that's how miracles happen. Just people being kind one after another." Neither of them could stop smiling. And though they didn't know it yet, their kindness was far from done. Because what started on that rainy road was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that would continue to touch lives they hadn't even met yet. The following days felt different in their small apartment. There was a quiet sense of peace in the air, the kind that comes after a storm. For so long, Daniel and Lena had lived under the weight of endless worries, bills, work, and the fear of not making it through the month. But that week, every time Lena looked at the note left by the old woman, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just about the money. It was the message, the reminder that kindness still existed, that good people still walked this world. She kept the note on the fridge, where she could see it every morning before leaving for work. The words, "If you ever feel hopeless, remember that good people still exist," gave her quiet strength. Each time she read it, she smiled, remembering the stranger's warm eyes and gentle voice. Daniel, too, felt lighter than before. He worked long hours at the auto shop, often coming home with grease-stained hands and tired eyes. But now something inside him had changed. Every time he felt worn down or angry about something small, he would think about that night in the rain, the look of relief on the woman's face when he finished fixing her car, and how he had told her to help someone else. Somehow, knowing that she actually had done it filled him with pride and peace. One evening, they sat together at the small dining table, the envelope of money between them. "We can finally pay off the electricity bill," Lena said with a small laugh, "and maybe buy some groceries without counting every coin." Daniel nodded but looked thoughtful. "We should use some of it, yes," he said slowly. "But not all." She frowned a little. "What do you mean?" He looked up, his eyes soft. "That woman helped you because I helped her. It feels like this money isn't just for us, it's for helping others too. Maybe we can use some to help someone else who's struggling." Lena stared at him for a moment, then smiled. "You really think so?" He nodded. "It's what she would have wanted. And maybe what we're meant to do." That night, they decided to keep $200 for themselves, to pay bills and get some groceries, and set aside the rest to use for good. They didn't have a plan yet, but both of them agreed that when the right moment came, they would know. A few days later, that moment arrived. Their neighbor, a young woman named Clara, lived with her little boy in the apartment next door. She was quiet, always polite, but lately Lena had noticed her struggling. She had seen the woman carrying heavy grocery bags alone, sometimes skipping meals so her son could eat. One morning, Lena saw her sitting outside the building steps, her face pale and tired. The boy was sitting beside her, holding her hand. Lena hesitated, then walked over. "Hey," she said softly, "is everything okay?" Clara looked up, embarrassed. "Oh, hi, yes, just trying to figure some things out." She smiled weakly. "I lost my job last week. It's been hard finding another one." Lena's heart sank. She knew that feeling all too well. The quiet panic of not knowing how you'd get through the next week. She sat beside her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone," she said. "We've been there too." That night Lena told Daniel about it. He didn't even hesitate. "We'll help her," he said firmly. "That's the sign we were waiting for." So, the next day, Lena knocked on Clara's door with 2 grocery bags full of food and an envelope with $100 inside. When Clara opened the door, she froze, her eyes widening in surprise. "What's all this?" she asked. Lena smiled. "Just a little help. We've had some kindness come our way recently, and we wanted to pass it on." Clara tried to refuse at first, her eyes filling with tears, but Lena gently pushed the bags toward her. "It's okay," she said softly. "Just accept it. And when things get better, help someone else. That's all we ask." Clara's lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." Lena smiled and hugged her. "I think I do," she said quietly. That evening, when Daniel came home, she told him everything. He smiled proudly. "You did the right thing," he said. "It feels good, doesn't it?" Lena nodded. "It does. It really does." Days later, they noticed something beautiful. Clara seemed happier. She found a part-time job and started smiling more often. Her son would wave excitedly every time he saw Daniel or Lena in the hallway. And though they never talked about the money again, there was a quiet understanding between them, a bond built from kindness. Weeks went by, and life slowly started to look brighter for everyone. Daniel's boss noticed his dedication and gave him extra shifts. Lena's tips at the diner began to increase, as if the world itself was rewarding them for the good they'd shared. But it wasn't just about luck. They both believed something deeper was happening, a ripple effect of kindness spreading quietly through the people around them. Because every time someone receives kindness, they carry it forward, even without realizing it. One night, as they sat together watching TV, Daniel said, "You know, I think miracles aren't always big or loud. Sometimes they're just small moments that connect people, like a chain of good deeds that keeps going." Lena smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. Yeah, she whispered. And we're part of that chain now. They didn't know it yet, but that chain was already reaching farther than they could see. A week later, Clara came to their door with a shy smile. In her hands was a small homemade pie, still warm. I wanted to thank you, she said, for helping me when I needed it most. I know it's not much, but I baked this for you. Lena accepted it with a laugh. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Clara said. Because of you, I was able to get back on my feet. And yesterday I helped a young boy I saw at the park. He looked lost and scared, so I bought him something to eat and called his parents. They were so thankful. Lena's heart swelled as she listened. It was happening. The goodness was spreading, just like Daniel said. After Clara left, Lena turned to him with tears in her eyes. It's real, she said softly. What we do really matters, Daniel smiled. It always has. That night they sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. The same rain that had started it all began to fall again, tapping gently against the glass. It was as if life was reminding them of that night, how one small choice to stop and help had led to all of this. As the rain grew heavier, Lena whispered, It's strange, isn't it? How one act of kindness can change so many lives. Daniel nodded. That's the miracle, he said. That's not magic, it's people choosing to care. They stayed like that for a while, holding hands, listening to the rhythm of the rain. Somewhere in that quiet moment, they both felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for what they had, but for the simple truth they had learned. When good people do good things, the world becomes a little softer, a little warmer, and a little more hopeful. Neither of them knew that the chain of kindness they started would soon come back to them once more, in a way even more powerful than before. But for now they just sat together, hearts full, believing that maybe the rain wasn't just water falling from the sky. It was the world washing itself clean, one act of goodness at a time. The weeks that followed were quiet but full of meaning. Daniel and Lena had found a new rhythm in life, a rhythm that wasn't just about survival anymore but about purpose. The note on the fridge still stayed there, now slightly worn from time, but every time one of them looked at it, they smiled. It wasn't just a reminder anymore. It had become a part of their story, a symbol of the simple truth that kindness always finds its way back. Their neighbor Clara was doing better too. She had started working at a small shop nearby and seemed happier every day. Her little boy often came knocking on their door after school just to say hello. Sometimes Lena would give him cookies or help him with homework while Clara worked late. The building that once felt like a place full of tired faces now carried a feeling of warmth, as if their little acts of kindness had somehow spread through the walls themselves. One evening, Lena and Daniel were sitting by the window again. It was one of those calm nights when the city lights looked soft and the world felt peaceful. You know, Daniel said, stirring his tea, I keep thinking about that woman, the one from the road. I wonder where she is now. Lena smiled. Wherever she is, I hope she knows what she started. Daniel nodded slowly. She probably doesn't, but maybe that's the beauty of it. You don't always see how your kindness grows. He was right. Because even as they spoke, their kindness was already moving forward in quiet ways they couldn't see. Clara's small act of helping that lost boy had led to something unexpected. The boy's father, who owned a small grocery store, had been so touched by her kindness that he began donating leftover food every week to a nearby shelter. One of the volunteers at that shelter started helping people on the streets find jobs, and from there the circle of goodness kept expanding, touching more and more lives, none of them knowing it had all started on a rainy night with a flat tire. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lena continued their lives with small, thoughtful gestures. Daniel began fixing small things for neighbors who couldn't afford repairs. Door handles, old bikes, leaky sinks. He never asked for payment. Just pay it forward, he would say with a smile. Lena, on her part, started keeping a jar on the counter at the diner labeled for someone in need. She never mentioned who it was for. Sometimes customers would drop in spare change, sometimes whole bills. Once a month, she'd take whatever was in the jar and quietly leave it for someone struggling. An old man who ate alone, a mother counting coins for her bill, or a college student studying late. Their lives weren't easy. There were still bills to pay and long hours to work, but somehow they didn't feel weighed down anymore. There was joy in their tiredness because they knew their efforts meant something. One cold morning, Daniel went to work earlier than usual. The air was crisp, and his breath made little clouds as he walked. At the auto shop, a customer had left behind a wallet on one of the seats. Inside was a thick stack of cash, along with several important cards. Without thinking twice, Daniel picked it up, called the number on one of the cards, and waited until the owner came back to claim it. The man, dressed in a suit, looked shocked when Daniel handed it over untouched. "You could have kept it," he said, half joking. "No one would have known," Daniel smiled. "I would have known," he said simply. The man's expression softened. He reached into the wallet, trying to offer a reward, but Daniel refused politely. "Just help someone else when you can," he said, the same words he'd once spoken on that rainy night. The man nodded thoughtfully and left. Daniel didn't think much of it after that, but little did he know that same man would later become another link in the unseen chain. That evening, Lena returned home with a heavy heart. One of her co-workers, a young woman named Nora, had been crying in the back of the diner earlier that day. Her mother had fallen sick, and she couldn't afford the medicine she needed. Lena had comforted her but felt helpless, until she remembered the kindness that had saved her once. That night, she took the small jar from the counter, counted the money, and found just enough to buy what Nora needed. The next morning, she handed it to her quietly, saying, "Someone once helped me when I needed it most. Now it's your turn." Nora was speechless, her eyes full of tears.
How can I ever repay you?
She asked. Lena smiled. "You already can," she said softly. "Just help someone else one day." It seemed like those words had become a part of their lives, like a secret language shared only by those who believed in goodness. As the months passed, Daniel and Lena started noticing something beautiful. They were no longer the only ones doing good in their small community. Their neighbors had started helping each other too. People shared food, fixed broken things for one another, and looked out for those who were struggling. Even the landlord, who had once been strict about late rent, started showing small kindnesses, giving people more time when they needed it. One evening, as winter approached, Daniel and Lena hosted a small dinner for their neighbors. Nothing fancy, just soup, bread, and laughter. Clara brought her pie again, the one she'd baked months earlier as a thank you gift. Nora came too, smiling for the first time in weeks. The atmosphere was simple and warm, filled with stories of small acts of goodness that had happened around them. Each story connected to another, forming a chain so long it was hard to believe it had all started with one man stopping his car in the rain. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Daniel sat by the window again. Snow was beginning to fall outside, soft and quiet. Lena joined him, wrapping a blanket around them both. "It's strange, isn't it?" she whispered. "We started with nothing, just one act of kindness, and look at how far it's gone." Daniel nodded, his eyes on the falling snow. "It's like throwing a small stone into a pond. You don't see where the ripples end." Lena smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you think it'll ever stop?" He shook his head. "No, kindness doesn't stop. It just keeps moving, finding new people to touch." They sat in silence, watching the snow blanket the streets below. There was something peaceful about the way the world looked, clean, calm, and full of quiet promise. Daniel reached out and took her hand. "We did good, didn't we?" he said softly. She squeezed his hand back. "We just did what good people do." And somewhere far away, the elderly woman who had once stood stranded in the rain was thinking of them too. She had never forgotten the man who had helped her that night. In her heart, she often prayed for him, hoping life had been kind. She didn't know that her simple decision to help a waitress that night had set off a chain of miracles that had reached dozens of hearts. Life went on for Daniel and Lena, full of ordinary moments made special by the goodness they carried within them. They had learned something that many people forget, that you don't need much to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is stopping when others drive by, listening when others ignore, and giving when others hold back. And though they didn't know it yet, one more miracle was waiting for them. A miracle that would bring everything full circle, proving once and for all that when good people do good things, miracles don't just happen once, they keep happening again and again, in ways no one can ever fully see. Spring came gently that year. The snow melted slowly, revealing green patches of life beneath. The air felt lighter and the streets began to fill with the sound of laughter again. Daniel and Lena's lives had settled into a peaceful routine, one built on quiet joy and gratitude. They didn't have much, but somehow they always had enough. It was as if life itself had started rewarding their goodness in small, beautiful ways. One morning, Daniel was heading to work when he noticed an envelope slipped under their door. It wasn't addressed to anyone, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Curious, he picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a simple note that read, "Thank you for changing my life," and a small photograph of a smiling young man holding his graduation cap. Daniel frowned, puzzled. He didn't recognize the person at all, but as he looked closer, he saw something written at the bottom of the photo. "My mother told me about you. Because of you, we made it." He sat down at the kitchen table, holding the picture in silence. Lena came over, drying her hands on a towel. "What's that?" she asked softly. Daniel handed her the note. She read it and smiled with teary eyes. It must be someone connected to Clara, she guessed. Maybe her son. Daniel nodded slowly. "It's strange, isn't it? You never know where your kindness ends." Lena sat down beside him. "That's the beauty of it. You plant a seed and it grows somewhere you might never see." They decided to keep the note on their fridge beside the old one, the one that had started it all. Every time they saw it, they were reminded that good deeds have long roots. That same week, Daniel got some unexpected news at work. The man whose wallet he had returned months ago, the one who had offered him money that day, had come back to the shop. This time he wasn't just there for car repairs. He wanted to speak to Daniel personally. Dressed neatly but with a warm smile, the man extended his hand. "I never forgot what you did for me," he said. "That day made me think about how I live my life. I've been helping people since then, just like you told me. And now I want to help you." Daniel looked surprised. "Help me how?" The man smiled. "I own a small business, an auto parts company. We're opening a new branch, and I need someone honest and skilled to manage it. I couldn't think of anyone better." Daniel's mouth fell open. He wasn't expecting anything like that. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Say yes," the man said kindly. "You've earned it." That night, when Daniel told Lena, she covered her face in disbelief. "After everything we've been through, it's like life finally came full circle," she whispered. He nodded, still overwhelmed. They both knew this wasn't just luck. It was the quiet reward of doing the right thing when no one was watching. The following weeks were filled with change. Daniel started his new job, managing the new branch. It was hard work, but it made him proud. Lena continued at the diner, but something inside her began to dream bigger too. With Daniel's encouragement, she started baking again, something she hadn't done in years. Every weekend, she sold her homemade bread and cookies at the local market. People loved them, especially because she greeted everyone with genuine warmth. It wasn't long before her small table at the market became a favorite spot in the neighborhood. But the real magic was in how their kindness continued to ripple. Clara, now fully back on her feet, had started volunteering at a shelter. Nora, the young woman from the diner, had found a new job and often came by to help Lena bake. Even the landlord, who used to be so strict, began joining the neighbors for small gatherings, helping out with maintenance work for free. One evening, as the sun began to set, Lena came home early carrying a small box. She looked excited. "I have an idea," she told Daniel. "Let's use the money from my baking to do something special this month." He smiled. "What do you have in mind?" "Let's host a community dinner," she said, her eyes shining. "But this time, let's invite everyone. People who have no one, people who've helped us, everyone who believes in kindness." Daniel laughed softly. "You mean a kindness dinner?" "Exactly," she said. "A night to celebrate the good that still exists in the world." And so they planned it. The whole neighborhood helped. Some brought food, others offered tables and chairs. Even the small shop owners around the block donated things: flowers, bread, fruit. The dinner took place in the open courtyard of their building, lit by strings of soft yellow lights. Children ran around laughing, while old folks shared stories of their youth. The air was filled with warmth and laughter. Lena stood for a moment just watching. It was beautiful to see. People coming together not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She looked over at Daniel, who was helping an elderly man find a seat, and her heart swelled with gratitude. When it grew quiet later that evening, Clara stood up and spoke softly. "I just want to say thank you to everyone here, but especially to two people who reminded me that even when life gets hard, kindness can bring you back." She looked at Daniel and Lena. "You showed us that one good act can change everything." The crowd clapped, and Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wasn't someone who liked attention, but he understood what she meant. It wasn't about being heroes. It was about being human. After everyone left, Daniel and Lena sat together under the lights, listening to the soft hum of the night. "Do you ever think about how all this started?" Lena asked quietly. Daniel smiled. "Every day. It's crazy," she said. "One night, one small decision, and it led to all of this." He nodded. "I think the world works that way. We just forget sometimes." They sat there for a long while, not saying much, just feeling the peace that comes when you know you've done something good. The wind was gentle, carrying laughter from a few blocks away, and the stars were faint but steady. The next morning, Lena found another envelope under their door. This one was smaller, written in a familiar hand. When she opened it, she gasped. Inside was a letter from the elderly woman Daniel had helped long ago. Somehow she had tracked them down. The letter read, "You probably don't remember me, but I will never forget you. That night in the rain changed my heart. I had spent years thinking the world had lost its kindness. But you proved me wrong. Because of you, I started volunteering at a small center for people in need. We've helped dozens of families, and every time someone asks why, I tell them about a young man who stopped his car when everyone else passed by. You reminded me that goodness still exists. I just wanted to say, thank you." Lena covered her mouth with her hand as she read it aloud. When she finished, Daniel sat quietly, tears shining in his eyes. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he whispered, "I guess it really did come full circle." Lena smiled through her tears. "You see? The chain never broke." He looked at her, his heart full. "No, it just kept growing." That night they placed the letter beside the others on the fridge. 3 simple pieces of paper, each one carrying a story of kindness, each one proof that goodness never dies. As they stood there arm in arm, Daniel said softly, "You know what I think?" "What?" Lena asked. "I think this world would be a better place if more people believed that one good act can change everything." She nodded. And maybe that's how it starts, with just one person deciding to care. Outside, the street was quiet. A gentle breeze moved through the trees and the stars shimmered softly above. Inside that small apartment, surrounded by love, hope, and the quiet hum of life, 2 people understood something simple and true. Kindness never disappears. It just finds new hearts to live in, again and again, like light passing from one candle to another, keeping the world bright in the darkest of nights.